I am asking you to believe. Not in my ability to bring about change, but in yours. I'm very careful to remind everybody that the model for the Affordable Care Act was a plan that Mitt Romney had successfully passed with Ted Kennedy in Massachusetts. Obama dispels protester. All right, I think we're okay now. I notice this has been happening everywhere, and I keep on telling folks you've got to organize your own rallies. If you're confident about the other guy, just go to his rallies. I feel confident about my candidate. That's why I'm at this rally. So you don't have to spend time over here. So I want the American people to understand that we have a clear and focused goal, to disrupt, dismantle and defeat Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and to prevent their return to either country in the future. That's the goal that must be achieved. That is a cause that could not be more just. And to the terrorists who oppose us, my message is the same: we will defeat you. Most people who meet my wife quickly conclude that she is remarkable. They are right about this. She is smart, funny and thoroughly charming. Often, after hearing her speak at some function or working with her on a project, people will approach me and say something to the effect of, "You know, I think the world of you, Barack, but your wife, wow." Today's politician understands this. He may not lie, but he understands that there is no great reward in store for those who speak the truth, particularly when the truth may be complicated. The truth may cause consternation, the truth will be attacked, the media won't have the patience to sort out all the facts, and so the public may not know the difference between truth and falsehood. What comes to matter then is positioning, the statement on an issue that will avoid controversy or generate needed publicity, the stance that will fit both the image his press folks have constructed for him and one of the narrative boxes the media has created for politics in general. I've seen how inadequate words can be in bringing about lasting change. I've seen how inadequate my own words have been, and so I'm reminded of a passage in John's Gospel: "Let us love not with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." If we're to sustain the unity we need to get through these difficult times, if we are to honor these 5 outstanding officers who we've lost, then we will need to act on the truths that we know. And that's not easy. It makes us uncomfortable. But we're going to have to be honest with each other and ourselves. So we shouldn't downplay how far we've come. That would do a disservice to all those who spent their lives fighting for justice. At the same time, there's still a lot of work we need to do to improve the prospects of women and girls here and around the world. And while I'll keep working on good policies, from equal pay for equal work to protecting reproductive rights, there are some changes that have nothing to do with passing new laws. His Holiness Pope Francis told this body, from the very spot that I'm standing on tonight, that to imitate the hatred and violence of tyrants and murderers is the best way to take their place. When politicians insult Muslims, whether abroad or, who are our fellow citizens, when a mosque is vandalized, or a kid is called names, that's not making us safer. That's not telling it like it is. It's just wrong. It diminishes us in the eyes of the world. It makes it harder to achieve our goals. It betrays who we are as a country. In reaffirming the greatness of our nation, we understand that greatness is never a given. It must be earned. Our journey has never been one of shortcuts or settling for less. It has not been the path for the faint-hearted, for those that prefer leisure over work, or seek only the pleasures of riches and fame. Rather, it has been the risk-takers, the doers, the makers of things, some celebrated, but more often men and women obscure in their labor, who have carried us up the long rugged path towards prosperity and freedom. You have to constantly market and explain what you are doing, and we figured that out but a little bit later than we probably should have. I'm not coming here to fix any votes. I'm not casting a vote myself. I'm offering my opinion. And in democracies, everybody should want more information, not less. And you shouldn't be afraid to hear an argument being made. If, right now, I've got access to a massive market where I sell 44% of my exports, and now I'm thinking about leaving the organization that gives me access to that market and that is responsible for millions of jobs in my country and responsible for an enormous amount of commerce and upon which a lot of businesses depend, that's not something I'd probably do. I was helped even more by a handful of mostly older students, black kids from the inner city, white kids who had scratched their way into college from small towns, first-generation Latino kids, international students from Pakistan or India or countries in Africa that teetered on the edge of chaos. They knew what mattered to them. When they spoke in class, their views were rooted in actual communities, actual struggles. But our democracy might work a bit better if we recognize that all of us possess values that are worthy of respect. If liberals at least acknowledged that the recreational hunter feels the same way about his gun as they feel about their library books, and if conservatives recognized that most women feel as protective of their right to reproductive freedom as evangelicals do of their right to worship. In few other professions are you required, each and every day, to weigh so many competing claims, between different sets of constituents, between the interests of your state and the interests of the nation, between party loyalty and your own sense of independence, between the value of service and obligations to your family. There is a constant danger, in the cacophony of voices, that a politician loses his moral bearings and finds himself entirely steered by the winds of public opinion. Because one of the things I've discovered is excelling, whether it's in school or in life, isn't mainly about being smarter than everybody else. That's not really the secret to success. It's about working harder than everybody else. So don't avoid new challenges, seek them out, step out of your comfort zone, don't be afraid to ask for help. Your teachers and family are there to guide you. They want to know if you're not catching on to something because they know that if you keep on working at it, you're going to catch on. Look at the faces here around you, and you see an America that is more fair and more free and more just than the one Dr. King addressed that day. We are right to savor that slow but certain progress that's expressed itself in a million ways, large and small, across this nation every single day, as people of all colors and creeds live together, and work together, and fight alongside one another, and learn together, and build together, and love one another. This is the price and the promise of citizenship. This is the source of our confidence, the knowledge that God calls on us to shape an uncertain destiny. This is the meaning of our liberty and our creed, why men and women and children of every race and every faith can join in celebration across this magnificent mall, and why a man whose father less than 60 years ago might not have been served in a local restaurant can now stand before you to take a most sacred oath. My own American journey was paved by generations of citizens who gave meaning to those simple words, to form a more perfect union. I've studied the Constitution as a student, I've taught it as a teacher, I've been bound by it as a lawyer and a legislator. I took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief, and as a citizen, I know that we must never, ever, turn our back on its enduring principles for expedience sake. I'm here to say we must reject such despair. I'm here to insist that we are not as divided as we seem. I know that because I know America. I know how far we've come against impossible odds. I know we'll make it because of what I've experienced in my own life, what I've seen of this country and its people as president. And I know it because of what we've seen here in Dallas, how all of you, out of great suffering, have shown us the meaning of perseverance, and character, and hope. When all this takes place, more than 50 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, we cannot simply turn away and dismiss those in peaceful protest as troublemakers or paranoid. And yes, it's important that their dad is a feminist, because now that's what they expect of all men. We can't simply dismiss it as a symptom of political correctness or reverse racism. To have your experience denied like that, dismissed by those in authority, dismissed perhaps even by your white friends and co-workers and fellow church members, again and again and again, it hurts. Surely we can see that, all of us. We also know what Chief Brown has said is true, that so much of the tensions between police departments and minority communities that they serve is because we ask the police to do too much and we ask too little of ourselves. We don't need inflammatory rhetoric. We don't need careless accusations thrown around to score political points or to advance an agenda. We need to temper our words and open our hearts, all of us. We need what we saw in Dallas this week, as a community came together to restore order and deepen unity and understanding. We need the kind of efforts we saw this week in meetings between community leaders and police, some of which I participated in, where I saw people of goodwill pledge to work together to reduce violence throughout all of our communities. That's what's needed right now. Now, if you're one of the 30 million Americans who don't yet have health insurance, starting in 2014 this law will offer you an array of quality, affordable, private health insurance plans to choose from. Each state will take the lead in designing their own menu of options, and if states can come up with even better ways of covering more people at the same quality and cost, this law allows them to do that, too. Now, the choice we face is not between saving our environment and saving our economy. The choice we face is between prosperity and decline. We can remain the world's leading importer of oil, or we can become the world's leading exporter of clean energy. We can allow climate change to wreak unnatural havoc across the landscape, or we can create jobs working to prevent its worst effects. We can hand over the jobs of the 21st century to our competitors, or we can confront what countries in Europe and Asia have already recognized as both a challenge and an opportunity. The nation that leads the world in creating new energy sources will be the nation that leads the 21st century global economy. We need to invest in the skills and education of our people. Now, this year, we've broken through the stalemate between left and right by launching a national competition to improve our schools. And the idea here is simple: instead of rewarding failure, we only reward success. Instead of funding the status quo, we only invest in reform that raises student achievement, inspires students to excel in math and science, and turns around failing schools that steal the future of too many young Americans, from rural communities to the inner city. I first ran for Congress in 1999, and I got beat. I just got hooped. I had been in the state legislature for a long time, I was in the minority party, I wasn't getting a lot done, and I was away from my family and putting a lot of strain on Michelle. Then for me to run and lose that bad, I was thinking maybe this isn't what I was cut out to do. I was 40 years old, and I'd invested a lot of time and effort into something that didn't seem to be working. But the thing that got me through that moment, and any other time that I've felt stuck, is to remind myself that it's about the work. Because if you're worrying about yourself, if you're thinking, am I succeeding? Am I in the right position? Am I being appreciated? Then you're going to end up feeling frustrated and stuck. But if you can keep it about the work, you'll always have a path. There's always something to be done. What makes us American is not a question of what we look like, or where our names come from, or the way we pray. What makes us American is our fidelity to a set of ideals, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve the chance to make of our lives what we will, that all of us share an obligation to stand up, speak out, and secure our most cherished values for the next generation. That's how America has traveled this far. That's how, if we keep at it, we will ultimately reach that more perfect union. 44 Americans have now taken the presidential oath. The words have been spoken during rising tides of prosperity and the still waters of peace. Yet, every so often, the oath is taken amidst gathering clouds and raging storms. At these moments, America has carried on not simply because of the skill or vision of those in high office, but because we, the people, have remained faithful to the ideals of our forebears and true to our founding documents. So it has been, so it must be with this generation of Americans. One of the things that I think it's important for progressives to do when we're in a reflective mode after an election like this is, we can't have it both ways. We can't say, why aren't you reaching out to the folks who voted against us? And by the way, why aren't you maximizing getting 100% for the things that those of us, who are already progressive and living on the coasts think should be done right away? The point is that politics in a big, diverse country like this requires us to move the ball forward not in one long Hail Mary to the end zone, but to, systemically make progress. America has never been about what one person says he'll do for us. It's always been about what can be achieved by us, together, through the hard, slow, sometimes frustrating, but ultimately enduring work of self-government. Look, by dint of biography, by dint of experience, the basic optimism that I articulate and present publicly as president is real. It's what I teach my daughters. It is how I interact with my friends and with strangers. I genuinely do not assume the worst, because I've seen the best so often. So it is a mistake that I think people have sometimes made to think that I'm just constantly biting my tongue and there's this sort of roiling anger underneath the calm Hawaiian exterior. I'm not that good of an actor. So we need to break through these limitations. We need to keep changing the attitude that raises our girls to be demure and our boys to be assertive, that criticizes our daughters for speaking out and our sons for shedding a tear. We need to keep changing the attitude that punishes women for their sexuality and rewards men for theirs. We need to keep changing the attitude that permits the routine harassment of women, whether they're walking down the street or daring to go online. We need to keep changing the attitude that teaches men to feel threatened by the presence and success of women. We need to keep changing the attitude that congratulates men for changing a diaper, stigmatizes full-time dads, and penalizes working mothers. We have our divisions, and they are not new. Around-the-clock news cycles and social media sometimes amplify these divisions, and I know we're about to enter a couple of weeks of conventions where our political rhetoric tends to be more overheated than usual. And that is why it is so important that everyone, regardless of race or political party or profession, regardless of what organizations you are a part of, everyone right now focus on words and actions that can unite this country rather than divide it further. Havana is only 90 miles from Florida, but to get here we had to travel a great distance over barriers of history and ideology, barriers of pain and separation. The blue waters beneath Air Force One once carried American battleships to this island to liberate, but also to exert control over Cuba. Those waters also carried generations of Cuban revolutionaries to the United States, where they built support for their cause. And that short distance has been crossed by hundreds of thousands of Cuban exiles, on planes and makeshift rafts, who came to America in pursuit of freedom and opportunity, sometimes leaving behind everything they owned and every person that they loved. I think there's a British poet who once said, "No man is an island, even an island as beautiful as this." We're stronger together. And if we continue to tackle our challenges together, then future generations will look back on ours, just as we look back on the previous generation of English and American citizens who worked so hard to make this world safer and more secure and more prosperous, and they'll say that we did our part, too. And that's important. That's important not just here. That's important in the United States, as well. I try to avoid an either/or approach to solving the problems of this country. There are questions of individual responsibility and questions of societal responsibility to be dealt with. The best example is in education. I'm going to insist that we've got decent funding, enough teachers, and computers in the classroom. But unless you turn off the television set and get over a certain anti-intellectualism that I think pervades some low-income communities, our children are not going to achieve. Hillary's hard work is not always appreciated. Which is true of a lot of the work women do, by the way. The anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican, anti-Muslim and anti-refugee sentiment expressed by some Americans today echoes nativist lurches of the past, the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, the Know-Nothings of the mid-1800s, the anti-Asian sentiment in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and any number of eras in which Americans were told they could restore past glory if they just got some group or idea that was threatening America under control. We overcame those fears and we will again. You have to stay encouraged. Don't get cynical. Don't ever think you can't make a difference. As you know, Spotlight is a film about investigative journalists with the resources and the autonomy to chase down the truth and hold the powerful accountable. Best fantasy film since Star Wars. I believe the FCC should create a new set of rules protecting net neutrality and ensuring that neither the cable company or the phone company will be able to act as a gatekeeper, restricting what you can do or see online. I don't know. What I can say for certain is that I'm not yet ready to abandon the possibility of America, not just for the sake of future generations of Americans but for all of humankind. This is not entertainment. This is not a reality show. This is a contest for the presidency of the United States. Change will not come if we wait for some other person, or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. When people say, Black lives matter, that doesn't mean blue lives don't matter. This is the paradox that defines our world today. The world is more prosperous than ever before and yet our societies are marked by uncertainty and unease. If you want to persuade me that everything is going to be terrible, then we can talk ourselves into that. Or we can act. Justice has been done. We are once again reminded that America can do whatever we set our mind to. Thank you. May God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America. Aside from any particular issue, the President needs to recognize that this is not about you. That's what we mean when we say our nation has been exceptional. Not that we've been flawless from the start, but that we've been able to change. Our democracy will not work without the sense that everyone has an economic opportunity. Our efforts will fail in Afghanistan and Pakistan if we don't invest in their future. John McCain is an American hero, one of the bravest fighters I've ever known. Cancer doesn't know what it's up against. Give it hell, John. In fact, the most important change may be the toughest of all, and that's changing ourselves. We're not done perfecting our union, or living up to our founding creed, that all of us are created equal and free in the eyes of God. If you want to fight climate change, we've got to engage not only young people on college campuses, but reach out to the coal miner who's worried about taking care of his family, the single mom worried about gas prices. We don't have a common market in the Americas. But in all sorts of ways, the United States constrains itself in order to bind everyone under a common set of norms and rules that makes everybody more prosperous. The United States is home to 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. Think about that. But the elected officials who matter most in reforming police departments and the criminal justice system work at the state and local levels. If you disrespect women before you are elected president, you will disrespect women when you're in office. To anyone out there who's hurting, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's a sign of strength. It is absolutely men's responsibility to fight sexism too. And as spouses and partners and boyfriends, we need to work hard and be deliberate about creating truly equal relationships. In the United States, hopefully, what we're building are not just pyramids, are not icons to one pharaoh. What we're building is a culture and a way of living together that we can look back on and say, this was good, was inclusive, was kind, was innovative, was able to fulfill the dreams of as many people as possible. And there's one area where Donald's experience could be invaluable, and that's closing Guantanamo, because Trump knows a thing or two about running waterfront properties into the ground. At the moment that we persuade a child, any child, to cross that threshold, that magic threshold into a library, we change their lives forever, for the better. Someone once wrote, a bullet need happen only once, but for peace to work we need to be reminded of its existence again and again and again. Today I say to you that the challenges we face are real. They are serious and they are many. They will not be met easily or in a short span of time. But know this, America, they will be met. History reminds us that at every moment of economic upheaval and transformation, this nation has responded with bold action and big ideas. Let's, first of all, be clear, it is more important that I'm Michelle's husband than that I'm President of the United States. Forcing people to adhere to outmoded, rigid notions of identity isn't good for anybody, men, women, gay, straight, transgender, or otherwise. These stereotypes limit our ability to simply be ourselves. The question they have to ask themselves is, if you are repeatedly having to say in very strong terms that what he has said is unacceptable, why are you still endorsing him? You can tell that I'm a lame duck, because nobody is following instructions. Everyone have a seat. So regardless of the station we occupy, we have to try harder, to start with the premise that each of our fellow citizens loves this country just as much as we do, that they value hard work and family like we do, that their children are just as curious and hopeful and worthy of love as our own. By almost every measure, America is a better, stronger place than when we started. For us to have had this opportunity and to be able to make this much change, as much as we wish that we could have gotten everything done, it's remarkable. As this discussion reflects, what makes us American is our fidelity to a set of ideals. We need to temper our words and open our hearts, all of us. We need to keep changing the attitude that raises our girls to be demure and our boys to be assertive, that criticizes our daughters for speaking out and our sons for shedding a tear. We need to keep changing the attitude that punishes women for their sexuality and rewards men for theirs. And I told you then, 8 years ago, that I wasn't a perfect person and I wasn't going to be a perfect president, but what I guaranteed you, though, was that I would work every single day as hard as I could to make sure that working families all across this country got a better deal. If you succeed, then the country succeeds. Tonight it is my turn to say thanks. Whether we have seen eye to eye, or rarely agreed at all, the conversations I have had with you, have kept me honest, kept me inspired, and kept me going. And every day I have learned from you. Democracy does not require uniformity. Our founders argued, quarreled, eventually they compromised. And they expected us to do the same. But they knew that democracy does require a basic sense of solidarity. The idea that for all our outward differences, we are all in this together. We all rise and fall as one. But our time of standing pat, of protecting narrow interests and putting off unpleasant decisions, that time has surely passed. Starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America. Crowd chants, for more years. Obama, hey, I can't do that. Young people have helped lead all our great movements. How inspiring to see it again in so many smart, fearless students standing up for their right to be safe, marching and organizing to remake the world as it should be. We've been waiting for you. And we've got your backs. Change requires more than righteous anger. This is about young people who grew up in America, kids who study in our schools, young adults who are starting careers, patriots who pledge allegiance to our flag. These dreamers are Americans in their hearts, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper. Apparently his campaign has taken away his Twitter. They had so little confidence in his self-control they said, we're just going to take away your Twitter. If somebody can't handle a Twitter account, they can't handle the nuclear codes. Stark inequality is corrosive to our democracy. Race remains a potent and often divisive force in our society. Now, I've lived long enough to know that race relations are better than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago, no matter what some will say, but we are still not where we need to be. No matter what happens, the sun will rise in the morning. America will still be the greatest nation on earth. I ask Congress to move quickly on legislation that will finally reform our outdated regulatory system. It is time to put in place tough, new common-sense rules of the road so that our financial market rewards drive and innovation, and punishes shortcuts and abuse. While I'll keep working on good policies, from equal pay for equal work to protecting reproductive rights, there are some changes that have nothing to do with passing new laws. For far too many people, the more things have changed, the more things stayed the same. In fact, the most important change may be the toughest of all, and that's changing ourselves. When everybody is equal, we are all more free. I miss being anonymous. A lot of young people no longer see the trades and skilled manufacturing as a viable career. But I promise you, folks can make a lot more, potentially, with skilled manufacturing or the trades than they might with an art history degree. We are all now rooting for Trump's success. What is relevant is, what am I building that lasts? A capitalism shaped by the few and unaccountable to the many is a threat to all. Economies are more successful when we close the gap between rich and poor, and growth is broadly based. A world in which 1% of humanity controls as much wealth as the other 99% will never be stable. The long sweep of America has been defined by forward motion. What's powerful is that ideas can change on a dime. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. In my mother's world, the personal really was political, although she wouldn't have had much use for the slogan. At a time when so much of our politics is trying to manage this clash of cultures brought about by globalization and technology and migration, the role of stories to unify, as opposed to divide, to engage rather than to marginalize, is more important than ever. We need to keep changing the attitude that permits the routine harassment of women, whether they're walking down the street or daring to go online. We need to keep changing the attitude that teaches men to feel threatened by the presence and success of women. Our troops have pounded ISIL without mercy, taking out leaders, taking back territory. I know Hillary won't relent until ISIL is destroyed. She'll finish the job, and she'll do it without resorting to torture, or banning entire religions from entering our country. She is fit to be the next commander-in-chief. As President of the United States, I've called on our Congress to lift the embargo. Applause. It is an outdated burden on the Cuban people. It's a burden on the Americans who want to work and do business or invest here in Cuba. It's time to lift the embargo. If they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun. This is still a country that is less revolutionary than it is interested in improvement, Obama said. They like seeing things improved. But the average American doesn't think that we have to completely tear down the system and remake it. And I think it's important for us not to lose sight of that. We know that education is everything to our children's future. We know that they will no longer just compete for good jobs with children from Indiana, but children from India and China and all over the world. We know the work and the studying and the level of education that requires. In politics and in life, ignorance is not a virtue. It's not cool to not know what you're talking about. That's not keeping it real or telling it like it is. That's not challenging political correctness. That's just not knowing what you're talking about. On this day, we gather because we have chosen hope over fear, unity of purpose over conflict and discord. On this day, we come to proclaim an end to the petty grievances and false promises, the recriminations and worn-out dogmas that for far too long have strangled our politics. This year, in this election, I'm asking you to join me, to reject cynicism, reject fear, to summon what's best in us, to elect Hillary Clinton as the next President of the United States, and show the world we still believe in the promise of this great nation. They marched as Americans who had endured hundreds of years of brutal violence, countless daily indignities, but they didn't seek special treatment, just the equal treatment promised to them almost a century before. Democracy is threatened whenever we take it for granted. It's harder to end a war than begin one. What greater expression of faith in the American experiment than this? What greater form of patriotism is there than the belief that America is not yet finished, that we are strong enough to be self-critical, that each successive generation can look upon our imperfections and decide that it is in our power to remake this nation to more closely align with our highest ideals? Fear is powerful. Telling people that somebody's out to get you, or somebody took your job, or somebody has it out for you, or is going to change you, or your community, or your way of life, that's an old story and it has shown itself to be powerful in societies all around the world. It is a deliberate, systematic effort to tap into that part of our brain that carries fear in it. Today, women make up half of America's workforce. They are primary or co-breadwinners in 2/3 of our families. Their contributions are vital to the success of our economy. Today, girls like my daughters, young women like the ones at this dinner, have opportunities that my grandmother never dreamed of for herself. I see Americans of every party, every background, every faith who believe that we are stronger together, black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, young and old, gay, straight, men, women, folks with disabilities, all pledging allegiance, under the same proud flag, to this big, bold country that we love. That's the America I know. There's a point where the vanity burns away and you've had your fill of your name in the papers, or big adoring crowds, or the exercise of power. And for me that happened fairly quickly. And then you are really focused on, what am I going to get done with this strange privilege that's been granted to me? How do I make myself worthy of it? I am obligated to try to see the world through George Bush's eyes, no matter how much I may disagree with him. That's what empathy does. It calls us all to task, the conservative and the liberal, the powerful and the powerless, the oppressed and the oppressor. We are all shaken out of our complacency. We are all forced beyond our limited vision. Justice means that every child deserves a chance to grow up safe and secure, without the threat of violence. Justice means that the punishment should fit the crime. And justice means allowing our fellow Americans who have made mistakes to pay their debt to society, and rejoin their community as active, rehabilitated citizens.